This is where we left off the other day. So the outline is in place, but really there's no shading. So that's what we're going to contend with this class, is trying to get in some shading. And I do recommend that you're using some form of one of those various shading methods. So hatching, cross hatch, stipple, or even using scribble. You can combine several together, or you could just use one if that's what you prefer. But I would look at what you're trying to do and think about the texture you're trying to create. You want to suggest some form of texture. You want to try and also suggest volume. So I'm going to show you up close what I'm doing with that root. All right, so now you can see it up close. I am trying to wrap my line around that root. It kind of looks like the lines that are on a carrot. So if you look at a carrot, they have those kind of horizontal lines that wrap around the carrot. So this root is kind of thick. It's not a thin little spindly root, which is why I'm giving it so much attention. And I am also considering where the light's coming from. So in my picture, the light was coming from the right-hand side, and that's what I'm trying to replicate here in the drawing. So the shadow side is always opposite to where the light is. That's why there's a form shadow happening on that root. And I'm also, again, trying to suggest texture. There's some little dots on the root, and I'm doing some cross contour lines as well as just regular contour. And take your time on it. It's important that you slow down. It looks fast the way I'm drawing it, but that's because it's all in time lapse. And whatever is in shadow, I'm going to give it some hatching so it shows up as a little bit darker. And for those of you who are not opting to add color, I'm looking for a little bit more detail with the pen from you. So I am using a little bit of stipple there in places, but I'm mainly using hatching and crosshatch. So the leaf, when I look at it, I'm looking at it in terms of value, and the leaf is not a white value. It has some tone to it, so it's more of a gray. That's why I'm hatching it. You may look at the leaf and go, oh, it's green, but I want you to think more in terms of black and white. You can even switch your drawing or your reference picture to black and white. Just put it in a Google document and format it to be black and white, or you can use some kind of other editing software. And I'm cross-hatching in places where I want it to be a little bit darker, hatching where it's a lighter side of the leaf. And you can see it's starting to have some light and dark areas. And I'm trying to get a range of values. So there's at least 4 or 5 values there. To remind you, a value is how dark or how light a hue is, or a color. We're working in black and white, so I want you to think of it in terms of grayscale. So there's the brightest white, and then there's a range of values called midtones in between, and then there's the darkest black you can make. So you should have some areas that are darker and some areas that have midtone and some areas that you leave blank. I'm going to go and prepare for adding color to it. So the first thing I need to do is take a clean eraser and erase out any of my pencil marks that are visible or are showing in any way. So I'm doing that. Remember, when I went from that stage 1, which was just a pencil, to the pen, I made corrections. So I need to make sure I erase out any pencil marks that are still visible. If you paint watercolor on top, you'll still see the pencil marks through the watercolor because watercolor can be a transparent medium. And then you can see me kind of brushing off all that excess eraser stuff. I'm just wiping it free of the paper. So here's what it looks like just before applying the color. Let me preface this by saying that this part of the drawing is optional. If you are not going to apply color, I would expect you to have a little bit more detail with ink and with shading. So I would be a little bit more critical on that aspect. So if you are using color, I really recommend using either watercolors for this, or you could use colored pencils. I'm going to show you watercolor. I'm not going to show you colored pencils, but I will share a few techniques. So I just wanted to show you that I'm using a cheapy set of watercolors. So this is a like $10 set here. And the lids on most watercolor containers pop off. You can pop them off without breaking them. And those lids serve an important purpose. I'm sure some of you already know this, but it doubles up as a palette. What I'm doing with that palette there is I'm mixing my own colors. So for instance, I'm making my own green, and there's a number of ways I can do it. I can take one of the blues and one of the yellows together. I can also take the original green and then add another color to it. Like if I want it to be more earthy, I could add a little bit of orange to the green and it'll turn it more of an earth tone. I could also take a different blue and take that yellow gold and add that. So there's multiple ways you can do it. You can even take yellow and black together to make a green because black has a lot of blue in it. So if you add a lot of yellow and a little bit of black together, it should make a color like army green. So it's always good to make your own colors as opposed to using the paints that are already in those ovals. Those oval paints can be weaker paints. It's always going to be a stronger color or hue if you mix it yourself. If your reference picture that you're working from is not in color, but you plan on adding color, I would recommend looking up a photograph of that same plant or animal and just looking at that photograph to help you with lighting and color so you can get the right hue. And it does not have to be a perfect match. Refresher course on secondary colors. To make orange, you take yellow and red together, and if you want it to be more yellow, so more of like a yellow orange, you'd add obviously more yellow than red. It is important that you clean your brush off. You rinse it in a little cup of water each time you dip it into a new oval because you don't want to contaminate it. The worst thing that you can do is contaminate all your little oval patties of paint. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and apply it. I don't know if you saw me doing it over there, but I had a scrap paper that I was testing colors on first before I actually put them on the paper. That's not a bad practice, just to make sure you have the correct color so you don't put it on there and freak out when it's not the right color. So like with some of the other projects, I prefer to work dark to light, so I'm going for the darkest values here first. And I'm working specifically on the green areas. It's a good idea to have a different brush for different colors or to have a brush that's dedicated for cool colors like green or blue or violet, and then have a separate brush that's for warmer colors, so yellow, orange, red. Okay, so you can see that I've added some brown, but I've also added some violet to that brown for the roots. Also on the bulb, there's a little bit of purple in there as well. So I'm trying to make this look more like a scientific illustration, so it shows the color of the plant and the color of the root. And I'm saving the flowers for last because I'm using a different brush. If you don't have a second brush, just rinse that first one off really good in the sink and then switch to the color you want. So just be careful that you don't only do one value. Like on this yellow flower, I'm going to be using a couple of shades of yellow. So there's like a yellow and then there's a yellow gold and a little bit darker hue. Don't worry if your watercolor goes outside the lines a little bit. In fact, you can see that I did that a few times on mine. Oops. So anyway, here's what it looks like after I was done watercoloring it. And I don't know, I actually liked it in black and white better. But it's important that you explore it and see if it works. And don't give up even if you don't like what you see, that doesn't mean that you're not good at watercolor. The one couple of pointers that I wanted to mention about using colored pencils is that you want to layer them. So you would set down one color and layer on top. Usually the darker color goes down first. So if you wanted to layer down like a little bit of red, not pressing as hard as you can, just like a mild pressure, and then put yellow on top of it, it can make an orange. Or you can layer like red and then white on top of it, which will make a pink. So try layering with watercolor or with colored pencils. The direction of your stroke is important, just like it is when you're shading with a pencil. So just keep that in mind. And good luck.